The city has put a high value on environmental conservation and sustainable living, and out of that value has come our Complete Streets program. A concept nationwide, the Complete Streets program makes it easy to cross the street, walk to shops, and bicycle to work. It allows buses to have space and makes it safe for people to walk to and from train stations. Transportation planner Tim Davis will describe the program and the progress we were making, and the challenges to achieve complete streets. Well, welcome. So glad you're here to tell us almost completely about complete streets and what that does for the city to make everything more accessible.
Can you summarize what complete streets are, what a complete streets policy does?
Well, what a complete street is a transportation facility that meets the needs of all of our users. So it's not just roads are for cars. Roads are for cars, but they're also for bicycles. They're for the sides of roads are for pedestrians. There are lanes for bicycles. There are access points for people with disabilities and people that ride transit. So the idea of a complete street is meeting the needs of all of our users in the transportation corridor. As far as a policy is concerned, we did adopt the policy in 2016 after a rather arduous process of going through first our Metropolitan Planning Organization, the Transportation Planning Board, work groups coming up with a template. When you were alderman, you saw that beginning work start, and we worked through FACT and the Transportation Services Advisory Council, our own Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, the Planning Commission, the Board of Aldermen. So everybody had access and input to the template that the Transportation Planning Board had come up with. And so after that adoption, the first thing that we needed to do was be able to say, well, we've now adopted this policy, and here's what you need to do to implement this policy. And one of the things that you need to do to implement the policy is you need to change your design standards so that they're just not about 12-foot lanes and 4.5-foot sidewalks, that you actually now have design standards that our planners and our engineers can provide to the development community when they go to build their roads, as well as ourselves. When we go to build our own roads or improve our roads, we have these design standards in-house so that that people are having a predictable process in rebuilding or improving a road.
So there's two elements, it seems. There's how it impacts new development, and then there's the retrofit. We'll talk about those as sort of separate because you're going to deal with them in different ways. When we're talking about a new development, it doesn't mean you're just going to build a super wide road now that accommodates all these things, because there's ways to accomplish the objectives of complete streets outside of just the roadway itself, the neighborhood design, other kinds of improvements that can be made within a neighborhood setting.
Correct, and connectivity. Complete streets, a big portion of complete streets is ensuring that you have good connectivity. So you don't want to build neighborhoods that are all just curvilinear streets going into cul-de-sacs. You want people to be able to circulate within the neighborhood. So good point about the new development. But also it's important to know about the policy that it looks at roads hierarchically in the context of whether or not it's urban, suburban, or a rural feeling road. A rural feel road that's planned to be that way for the foreseeable future doesn't need transit stops every 400 feet. And if it's a 25-mile-an-hour road in a completely low density area, you really don't need to build bike lanes. Now, as far as the sidewalks and the handicap accessibility is concerned, always in place, no matter where we're building our roads. But those extra things in complete streets, you don't need to build those in some of those locations. And conversely, downtown, in the very urban setting of our downtown, there's some things we can't do because we're physically constrained, and there's some things we can't do downtown. But we're always looking at it. And I can give you a perfect example of an addition that we did in town, in the downtown, to provide for a more complete type street, and that's Maxwell Alley. With the support of our downtown NAC and our Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, Planning and Engineering developed a plan for a pilot section of Maxwell Alley to make it accessible for bicycles and pedestrians as well as cars.
And that's been very well received by the community. And the question that I frequently get is, so when are we going to do that with other alleys? When are we going to do more of these?
Well, the question is always, when are we going to do more of any of these things? And frankly, it always comes down to the feasibility of being able to do it in terms of time and money. But we have plans to do these improvements in our road surfacing program. We actually now internally have a complete streets distribution list so that everybody who would be touching a road reconstruction is on board and knows to be communicating with not only the planners, but the people that are actually out there in the field building the road or improving the road. So that way we know that, you know, if there's going to be a utility project or there's a resurfacing project and we're going to build a complete street, well, let's kind of try and make sure we map that out all at the same time, rather than, well, let's go in and put bike lanes and, well, no, now we're going to tear the road up, and, well, we fixed the road, but now we're going to put utility. We've got a plan to keep that from happening. It's very exciting to look at the road surfacing projects that are coming up and how many of them are on areas where we will be putting in bike lanes, and we do handicap improvements anyways at intersections when we retrofit streets. So we'll have that covered too.
Retrofitting the old communities, and you referenced this a little bit, we're constrained a little bit by space. So it's unlikely that the city is going to just tear up old streets to try and put in complete streets, because in an urban setting, it simply may not be appropriate to do the same kind of improvement as you would do out in a more suburban area. And you have different abilities for people to access different transit options in a more urban environment as well. So some of those things may already be built into a city infrastructure versus a suburban residential infrastructure.
Correct. And our resolution and our policy covers us in that sort of instance, that we aren't going to, move buildings in the downtown to accommodate, 16-foot sidewalks and a 5-foot bike lane and 2 12-foot travel lanes. Our policy specifically addresses giving us sort of, some leeway in that area so that we're not disrupting the community. But you're absolutely right. When it's a new road, out in the city, further out from the downtown, that's being a part of a new development, that road, the Planning Commission has the tools, the engineering department has the tools, everything is in place so that the developers know and it's predictable. And Mayor, for the most part, they want to build those kind of roads now because their customers, as it were, want that stuff. So there's enthusiasm from the development community in this.
Yeah, and I remember the conversation. It really was about concerns over regulation. We're happy to do it. Just tell us what it is that we're going to have to do, because they recognize that it is a product that their buyers are going to be looking for when they're looking for housing now. They want neighborhoods that you can get around, and they want it to be easy to get from one neighborhood to the neighborhood school, or to the neighborhood shopping, or to downtown, or to the interstate to get to a job that may not be in Frederick.
Right. Well, there was also some concern as to kind of along the lines of tearing up the streets, but that, well, complete streets is going to mean that you're going to go from 60-foot rights of way to 100-foot rights of way. Well, so you know, we've just done a new improvement on North Market Street from 7th to 9th, where we added a new bike lane, we reinforced where the parking was going to be, we repaved the street, and we have the lane and the left turn markers at the end, all in the appropriate place. We have 2 new innovative things in the city in that project, which is identifying a conflict zone at 8th Street with having a checkerboard green paint. And then at the end of the bike lane route at 9th Street, we've placed a bike box, which is something we've never done in the city, and it's painted green too. And the function of a bike box is to allow the cyclists to come up and be ahead of the traffic so that the cars can all see the bikes instead of the bikes being in their blind spot, for example. All the bicycles can be right in front of the traffic, so when the light turns, the bicyclist can move out and then move over, and then the traffic can come up because there isn't a continuing bike lane going north.
So what's the education to get both bicyclists to become more aware about, or anyone using a transit way to be more aware of the other modes of transportation that are in that corridor, to get greater understanding between different modes of transportation, that they are now in a shared, complete streets area, that they should be aware of all of these transit modes?
Well, we're doing it now, but we have done, with our audiovisual folks here at the city, we've done pedestrian safety videos, we've done how to use a bike lane video, we do, as I mentioned, the Bike to Work Day. We always do an educational component in our Bike to Work Day video that we do. And being a bike-friendly community that the City of Frederick is, we abide by what are called the 5 E's. Education is one of those, and that's this sort of thing is an education component to our city being bike-friendly.
Is there something next for complete streets?
More of them. That's pretty much the simple answer to that. It's more of them. But I mean, just in the last year, I would say, there's a much more heightened awareness amongst all the city staff, and you know, that's part of this policy as well. Is that, you know, it's everybody that's touching the roadway, from the very beginning of planning to the people that are, you know, resurfacing the streets and putting the bike lanes in, that everybody is on the same page, so to speak, when it comes to completing the streets in the city.
Are you aware of corridors that are particularly popular with people biking for work or pleasure?
Well, the Golden Mile is by far the most heavily traveled bicycle and pedestrian corridor. And we are in the process right now. The board will see a memorandum of understanding in June with the state to complete the design work for a 12-foot shared use path along the Golden Mile between Bauman's Lane and Waverly, which will accommodate all the cyclists and all the pedestrians in the same environment. And then the future is to include a bus lane in that same corridor for transit. So those elements all together help make the Golden Mile a complete street. And this project was, you know, heavily supported by the NACS and by the Golden Mile Alliance, and the memorandum of understanding is state funds to complete the design for that.
The public wants to know more. They want to do something to help or encourage or see this happen faster. What's that process?
Well, it's coming to our meetings and encouraging our planning commission, our bike ped advisory committee, the mayor and board of aldermen to, you know, accommodate for these things in their decision processes related to the budget and capital improvement projects. So that's the best way. It's always
engagement.
Yep, it's always best for people to come and speak because they do get listened to.
All right. Well, thank you so much. This has been fascinating, and it sounds very exciting, and we'll have to have you back to let us know when more is done.
Thank you.
Thank you.